All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Ask the Expert. It is the second Thursday. I thought it was the second Tuesday, but Alex helped me out. It's the second Thursday of the month, which means it's Alex's show, and I get to be the sidekick, which is one of my favorite things. And he is introducing Dr. Corbin Wong, who is an organizational psychologist, and I'm super excited to learn all about that. So, Alex, take it away.
Hi, Corbin. How are you doing today?
Good, Alex. It's always nice to see you, even though I met with you like 2 days ago.
So, I want to give a quick introduction to my very good friend here, Corbin. Corbin is a fantastic organizational psychologist who's been doing this over 12 years, specifically in the field of talent and development. And he's worked at some incredible companies, eBay, Citigroup, Deutsche Bank, Morgan Stanley. He's a professor, and right now he is the director of organizational and leadership development at Fordham. And I am so thrilled that you said yes to this, that you're here today. And one of the ways I love to get started is just to find out why organizational psychology. Why do you do what you do?
So, just to take a step back very quickly, I never had the intentions to become an organizational psychologist. So when I applied for undergraduate programs, I only focus on applying to architecture programs. And I'm not sure if you knew this, but the only schools I really focused on was architecture schools. And I had the fortunate opportunity to take a psychology class in high school. And during the first couple of years of undergrad, I realized that I really didn't want to become an architect. And also, when you come out of a degree program and the salary that you make as an architect wasn't that much, and you really don't make that much until you're like the age of Frank Lloyd Wright, which is probably like in 60s or 80s, right? So then I cried to my parents. I actually broke down and cried to my parents and said that I wanted to change my major and to do something very different. I told them that I wanted to become a psychologist, but I didn't really know what that would entail. So I switched my major to psychology. And I was in a program where they were great in terms of making sure that you were well-rounded and that you had to take classes in all different fields of psychology. And there was a minimum requirement where you had to take classes in 5 different fields of psychology. And one of them was industrial organizational psychology. And the undergraduate institution I went to had a wonderful program in IO psychology, and that just made me a lot more interested. It made me more interested because it wasn't what you typically think of when you think about psychology, where you think about someone being on a couch telling you all of their problems, all of their issues, right? This was more about how do you help individuals in a business environment, a business setting. And I also love the fact that there was a huge component related to statistics, which most people don't know. So if you ever do want to become an organizational psychologist, eventually you'll have to take at least 5 to 7 statistics classes in order to get that degree. And a lot of people don't realize that.
Wow, yes, statistics was not one of my favorite math classes.
But here's the thing, Martin, a lot of people don't realize that statistics is not really a math. Sometimes it's more of an art than a science. And that's the way, I guess, like a way that you can really reframe your mind into thinking about how statistics can be easy to use and beneficial to the work that you do.
Understood.
So I want to hear more about this organizational psychology, how you can go in and help a company do better, help a workforce do better, help employees become better. So talk a little bit about this that field of talent and development.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't realize that what falls under organizational psychology is a lot of different categories. specialize. So you can specialize in data science. You can specialize in people analytics. You can specialize in organizational change or change management. You can also specialize in executive coaching, or you can specialize in strategizing a talent and development process for individuals within the organization, which includes everything from coming up with a strategy on performance reviews, to reviewing your talent pipeline, to succession planning, to even focusing on just utilizing personality tests and different types of assessments to help teams become more effective and to help individuals become more effective in their role. So there's a lot that you can do. One area that I love to get involved in is using psychometric assessments to help teams of people or groups of individuals to perform better or to perform as effective as they can in their role. I just love personality tests in general. So I do like just implementing and administering any type of assessment and using that information just to drive success and to develop individuals within an organization.
So that makes sense. Oh, sorry, Alex, but we use DISC a lot.
I'm certified
in the real estate world to assemble teams. Go ahead, Alex. I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, you mentioned DISC, Martin, and Corbin, you mentioned psychometric assessments. What are the different assessments out there, and where could maybe someone find them? Let's say their company doesn't have a major talent and development program. Where could someone go and find some of these tests, and what are the tests?
Yeah, so there are a lot of free resources out there, free assessments that you can just leverage offline. However, you really need to be careful about them, because for a lot of these tests, right, when we think of from a researcher's perspective, the two most important components would be validity and reliability. When we talk about reliability, we're talking about consistency of the scores. So if Martin and you take the DISC assessment today, 6 months down the road, a year down the road, your results should not change that much. It should be pretty consistent. And that's a component of a good, solid, rigorous assessment. The other component is validity. You want to make sure that whatever it intends to measure is truly being measured by that particular assessment. So if the assessment is supposed to measure your level of conscientiousness or how extroverted you are, right? The questions that they are asking should really tap into those personality traits. So you just need to make sure whatever free resource that you're looking at, if we're talking about the DISC assessment, there's a free version that is provided by Tony Robbins. If you go on his website, that has, from my understanding, because I spoke with a consulting firm that actually helped him to develop that free assessment, that has strong validity and reliability. He gathers data over time, and he conducts studies and analyses just to make sure that the reliability and the validity holds up over time.
It's interesting to hear you talk about validity and reliability with a test, because it almost sounds like we're talking about all the COVID testing that is happening. I've heard this before about validity and reliability. So for example, let's say you were having a really bad day, you were having like a lot of negative emotions. That may not be a good time to take a personality test, right?
Yes, because you don't want the context to influence or what we consider a threat to validity. There are a lot of threats out there that could really impact the validity of any assessment that you take, any study that you might participate. Let's say that, for example, you're recruited to participate in some type of research study, and they'll say, Alex, I'm going to give you $150 to take part in this. I just got an email today where this company invited me to participate in a study. But let's say that it was the day after the election, right? And in New York City, you might recall, right?
I remember.
After the election, it seemed that a lot of individuals in the city didn't feel as positive, right? When I was
Right.
at Morgan Stanley, the head of HR actually had a town hall the day after the election just to speak with everyone within the department and just to make sure that everyone was feeling okay. So that day in particular, it wouldn't have been good to participate in any type of assessment, any type of study, because the historical context was a threat to begin with. And there are a lot of other, what we researchers call threats to validity, and history is actually one of them. The other thing is maturation, the fact that you are participating in this over and over and over and over, and you start to have an understanding of the questions that are being asked. So that is also a threat to validity as well.
Got it. So don't take too many of these tests because you get too good at them, huh?
Don't take the same one over and over and over again.
That's funny.
Got it. So I want to talk a little bit about your current role at Fordham, because it sounds pretty encompassing. And when we spoke earlier this week, you gave it a nickname. You called it the Chief Learning Officer, or CLO for short. Yeah, tell me what that means exactly. How are you working to develop the staff and the organization at Fordham?
Yeah. So what's interesting is this role came about because in 2018, Fordham conducted, they actually administer a survey to senior leadership and also to HR colleagues. And there were two key questions that they were curious to learn, which was, okay, of these different areas that a lot of institutions have or a lot of organizations have, do you feel that Fordham currently has that, or there's a need for that particular area? And if you feel that particular area is important, how is Fordham performing against that particular area? And the topic around talent and development came up a lot. So leadership development, organizational change, organizational development came up a lot. And the survey results showed that people felt it was really important. It was important to have, and that Fordham wasn't really doing much with respect to those particular areas. And this is how my role was created. And I was quite surprised that this role was open and that Fordham actually didn't have this role before, because a lot of institutions, a lot of organizations, especially at Fordham's size or at a very similar size, would have someone like me in that particular role. And they actually work with me on determining the title for the role, which is rare. They were like, how do you feel about this title? How do you feel about that title? And a lot of organizations, so my counterpart at UC Berkeley, her title is Chief Learning Officer. So it really depends on the organization or the institution that you're part of. But I like the sound of Director of Organizational Leadership Development a lot more. But essentially, it's the same thing as like a Chief Learning Officer, because I'm really the only one in that role right now. But
Wow.
yeah.
That's amazing. Academia lets you choose your own title. Where else would you find that? That's incredible.
Or maybe they were just being a lot more of a partner or collaborative in terms of but
maybe doing some psychology with you.
What was that?
Maybe doing some psychology with you.
Yeah. Yes.
So I'm curious, in this role at Fordham, what types of initiatives are you undertaking to develop leadership?
So once I joined, within the first month, I actually put together a strategy or things that I envisioned that the university would have for developing its people that a lot of places already do have. So for example, the talent review process is really important to me. And because that drives a lot of other initiatives that you would implement. And what does that mean? It means coming up with a process, a strategy for identifying your talent, being able to identify who's a high potential employee, who's a solid performer, who might be in the bottom 10% that needs a little bit more love, a little bit more development to help them to improve their performance. But once you're able to really put in that strategy in place to identify your talent, then you can really think about all of these other professional development programs and how they can align to different populations of people. So you might have a high potential development program that are only focused on your top 20% of the population, because the areas and competencies that they need to upskill on will be very different than people who are just average performers, right? Or your bottom 10%. Because sometimes you really need to think about, okay, if we have this group of individuals who are our high performers or high potential employees, we don't want them to leave. How can we retain them? How can we make sure that they still feel engaged within the organization? And sometimes those individuals feel neglected. They feel that, okay, I'm told I'm a strong performer, but not much is being done to engage me at this institution. So I'm trying to change that mindset where we need to establish that there are processes that we implement right away to make sure that we know how to curate our professional development resources for different types of people within the organization. And then the other focus I got really looped into is around our diversity and inclusion efforts. I'm not part of the diversity and inclusion team, but there's definitely a tie to the two. So one program I'm very excited to roll out, I'm calling it the Fordham Flourish program. And that's really going to give people a chance to network with each other and to learn from each other.
Wow. Is this for the students or the faculty or both? The Fordham Flourish, you called it?
It's really for the faculty and,
okay.
sorry, it's not for the faculty, it's for administrators. So under my remit, I focus on employees. That includes administrators, the clerical staff, and also the faculty as well. But this program is a pilot, and I'm going to try to engage our administrators first, and depending on how successful it is, then I will roll it out to the broader population. But in my role, I don't really focus on the student population because there's a group under career services that focuses on the students. Yeah.
So thanks for explaining that, Corbin. You said something that got me just thinking a lot, how to engage top talent, because I work with a lot of what I consider top talent at different organizations and companies, whether they be in finance or architecture. And a lot of times my clients will say to me, if I leave, I'll actually get paid more money because this new company really wants me. So, it's interesting to hear you say that at a company, it is tough to keep your best people or engage your best people because they're feeling neglected. What's something for anyone that may be listening that manages a team? What's a process or a way for them to, I guess, make that person feel engaged and appreciated? I mean, do you have to just give them more money or what do you do?
So what research has really demonstrated is that it's not about the money, it's about who your manager is, right? And that determines whether or not you stay or leave the organization. And what I'm trying to help managers understand is that it's not managing someone is not a check the box type of process. Today, I'm going to give my performance review, right? Check the box, got it done. And I'm doing that once or twice a year. I'm trying to change their mindset where they really need to coach their employees. And by coaching their employees, they're having more frequent conversations with their employees, and at the same time, trying to engage them in other ways, maybe giving them mobility opportunities throughout the institution that they've never really thought about. It might not necessarily take them to the next level, but it will probably help them to develop their skill sets and to maybe enhance some of their competencies that they didn't feel were necessary for them to be successful in their role. So it's really thinking about different ways that we can continue to engage them, and also focus on continuous learning. I think that's very key. Think about diversity and inclusion, right? A lot of companies now, with all the social justice issues that are occurring, what do they say right away? Oh my gosh, we have to give diversity and inclusion training to all of our employees, right? That is not successful if you're thinking about the fact that you're just implementing that once a year. And
yeah, that's the checkbox, right? Like, oh, we did the diversity thing, check.
Right. To say that you did it, that you care about social justice issues, right? But what you really need to think about is, oh, how can I make sure that I'm not just changing people's cognitive ability, where they're learning something new, but I'm also changing their behavior. And in order to change their behavior, especially when it comes to a topic such as diversity and inclusion, you need to make sure that you have continuous learning. So every month, maybe it's a different topic related to diversity and inclusion. Maybe how to become a better ally is one month. Maybe another month is about inclusive leadership. Maybe another month is about managing implicit bias. So you're constantly having that conversation, and that's a good way to change behavior. So when we think about how to retain our employees, we have to think about how can we provide continuous, I think continuous is a key word, continuous development opportunities, as opposed to just participate in this as a one-time thing, and that's good.
Yeah, that's super helpful and good information. You know, we were kind of talking about the top tier talent and, you know, the most motivated and the most successful, but I know every organization also has people that are not that, okay? And I'm just curious, because you've worked with, you know, 20, 30,000 different employees over your term, well, in all different companies you've worked at. What are some common deficiencies that you see? And what are maybe some ways that employees and, you know, the workforce can work on those deficiencies?
So I think this is where the talent review process is so important, right? Because you might have someone who is a poor performer, but with a lot of potential. And what does that mean? It means that their role is mismatched. There's a mismatch, right? They might be great in another department. They might be great in another role. And because they have the potential to perform well, but they just suck at what they're currently doing, right? And so it's very important to evaluate everyone and be open-minded that the fact that they might be a poor performer doesn't necessarily mean that they don't belong at the organization, right? So then you would work on creating an individual development plan with that individual to identify the competencies and the behaviors that they need to increase their skills in, or their knowledge about, or their ability in, and then you work with them on that individual development plan, as opposed to give them the boot or give them the axe.
And then that's great info. There's like a famous cartoon or meme, and it has like a picture of a couple of different animals, like a zebra and a rhino. And it said something like, if you measure all the animals based off of one talent, like the ability to fly, then then these animals are terrible. They suck. They can't fly, you know? But if you actually focus on what the animal's good at, you know, running or jumping or whatever it is, similar to your point, if you have this really amazing speaker, or you have someone that is really good at analyzing data, maybe take them away from the client-facing part and put them with the data analysis. That's your point, right?
Right. I think I like to have more of a positive mindset when it comes to developing employees. And I think that unless it's consistent poor performance over and over and over again, I think in my role is to really think about how can I help to develop someone to the best of their capability.
Yeah. You know, you got me thinking, because my sister manages a restaurant, And I just saw her last week, and she talked about how it's tough to manage a lot of the workers that work for her. They have a negative attitude, and they may be having personal things happening at home with their significant other or their parents or their kids. And we've been talking a lot more as a society about mental illness and mental health. And I'm just curious, you know, kind of as we wind down here with our conversation, it's crazy. I have like 15 more questions. But I do think this is such an important topic. So in the space of talent and development and taking care of our workers and trying to build the best organizations possible, do you have any ideas or tips or advice about how we can be there for each other, whether we're a manager or a coworker or whatever it might be?
Yeah, and I think one thing I'm really trying to do right now is to help managers and leaders think about how to coach their employees. They don't need to be an executive coach. I'm not asking you to go out and get an executive coaching certificate, right? But how can you be more coach-like? And I actually have a book right here that I think a lot of people could benefit from, and it's such an easy read, and I share this with my students. It's called The Coaching Habit. Say less, ask more, and change the way you lead forever. And it has 7 questions that you can really ask your employees just to get them to start talking. And it makes them feel that you're trying to engage in a conversation with them and that you care about them to a certain degree, right? And people like to share, but you have to ask the right questions, which are open-ended questions, where you can get that conversation going, right? And I think it's really important to try to be more coach-like as opposed to being a manager who's really just saying, you know, this is what you're doing wrong, you know, this is something that you need to fix, and so forth, when it needs to be more of a conversation, more of a dialogue.
It's amazing to hear you say this, because my advice to my sister was, take an active interest in your employees, talk to them, ask them questions, see how they're doing, really listen, really care. And it sounds like that's what you're saying. And it's so interesting. I just met with a personal trainer, a friend of mine, and she said the way she trains is not, she doesn't yell at you and tell you what to do. She approaches it more like a coach and holding you accountable and just trying to help you through the movement and guide you. So that's what it sounds like you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, and at the end of the day, I strongly believe that everyone owns their own career. Like, your manager is there as a supplemental resource to you, and the manager should serve as that, the leader should serve as that. It is really up to the employee in terms of how they want to navigate their career, right? But as a manager, you should be able to think about, okay, what can I do to help, to provide support? Even knowing that an employee might say, I don't want your help, right? But as a manager or as a leader, I think you can definitely be there to provide support.
Really amazing. And, you know, the last thing I want to end with, it's not necessarily tied to organizational leadership and psychology, is you do amazing volunteer work with this incredible tennis association. Can you just talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so I'm on the board. I'm also a volunteer and the vice chairman of the board for Kings County Tennis League, which is a Brooklyn-based nonprofit organization that uses tennis to develop youth from low-income housing. But we try not to just solely focus on using tennis. We try to give them exposure to other careers that they might not necessarily think about. So we'll take them to the Google headquarters, the NFL headquarters, Bleacher Report headquarters, so that they get experience and exposure to other careers outside that, depending on where they live, they might not know people in those roles, right? And this is actually our 10-year anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
Thank you.
And just remind us the organization's name one more time in case anyone wants to get involved.
It's Kings County Tennis League.
All right, beautiful. Dr. Wong, my good friend Corbin, thank you so much. Our time is up, unfortunately. But you've been an incredible wealth of knowledge. Again, we'll have to maybe do a second part because I have like another 15 questions here.
Yeah.
But,
At least, right?
at least. We just
Yeah.
scratched the surface. But Corbin, thank you again. Martin, thank you so much.